You ever meet someone who hates you so much, you start wondering if you wronged them in a past life? That's what it felt like dealing with Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. When I first moved into that neighborhood, I thought it was paradise, quiet streets, clean lawns, and friendly neighbors. But that was before Karen showed up at my doorstep holding a clipboard and wearing a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. "Your mailbox is 2 inches too tall," she said on my first day. "No welcome to the neighborhood. No cookies. Just rules." I laughed it off at first. Everyone said she was harmless, just an overzealous HOA president. But I'd soon find out that Karen didn't enforce rules. She weaponized them. It started small, warning letters about my trash can being visible, my grass not uniform in shade, and my dog barking excessively, which was ridiculous because my dog was a lazy golden retriever who barely barked unless food was involved. Then, things escalated. I built a small deck in my backyard, fully permitted, inspected, and approved by the city. But Karen claimed it violated community aesthetics. Next thing I knew, the HOA was fining me $500 a week until I took it down. I appealed. I won. And that's when I made my biggest mistake. I embarrassed her publicly. See, during the appeal meeting, I pulled out the county permits and city inspector's sign-offs right in front of her. The whole room saw her jaw drop. Some neighbors even laughed. That's when she glared at me, that cold, burning stare, and said, "You'll regret this." At the time, I thought it was just a threat from a sore loser. But now, looking back, I realized that was the moment she decided to destroy me. A few weeks later, weird things started happening. My car tires were slashed in the driveway. My mail started going missing. HOA notices appeared in my mailbox that didn't even exist in the community handbook. When I confronted her, she smiled and said, "Maybe if you were a better neighbor, people wouldn't be so angry." I reported everything, the vandalism, the harassment, but without proof, the police couldn't do much. So I installed cameras around my property. For a while, things went quiet. Then, one night, everything changed. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to my smoke alarm blaring. The air was thick with smoke. My heart pounded as I ran to the hallway and saw flames crawling up the living room wall. My house, my home that I'd spent years building, was on fire. I grabbed my dog, bolted out the back door, and called 911. The fire department arrived fast, but the flames were faster. Within minutes, the roof collapsed. I stood there barefoot on my lawn, watching everything I owned turn to ash. I remember the sound of the firefighters shouting, the hiss of the hoses, and the heat on my face. But what burned more than the fire was the rage, because deep down, I already knew who did this. The next morning, when the sun came up and the smoke cleared, I saw it, a melted HOA warning sign, planted right at the edge of the burnt foundation. And on the ground beside it, a half-burned clipboard. Karen's clipboard. The one she always carried. The police took everything into evidence. They combed through security footage, and sure enough, my cameras had caught the outline of a woman in a hoodie sneaking near my garage just before the fire started. But the moment that sealed her fate? The gas station camera down the road. It caught Karen buying 2 cans of gasoline and a lighter 30 minutes before my house went up in flames. They arrested her 2 days later. And when the officer told me, I swear I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. Karen, the woman who fined me for grass height, was now facing arson, destruction of property, and attempted manslaughter, since I'd been inside when the fire started. I had to move into a rental for a while. Everything I owned, furniture, photos, memories, was gone. I couldn't even save the deck she hated so much. Months passed, and finally, the day came, the court hearing. I walked into that courtroom wearing the same jacket I'd worn the night of the fire, still faintly smelling of smoke. And when they brought Karen in, shackled and wearing an orange jumpsuit, she looked at me and smiled like she'd won. The judge started reading the charges, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was Karen's eyes, calm, cold, and proud. That's when the prosecutor leaned toward me and whispered, "She's not just here for trial. She's here for sentencing. That's when I realized this wasn't about justice anymore. This was the end of her story and the beginning of mine. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that made your heartbeat feel too loud. The prosecutor flipped through his notes while Karen sat there, chin high, acting like she was attending a garden club meeting, not her own sentencing for arson and attempted murder. She wasn't in cuffs anymore, but her hands were folded so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. The judge, an older man with kind eyes but a firm voice, looked over the case file, then at me. "Mr. Walker," he said, "before we proceed to sentencing, you have the right to make a statement." I stood up slowly. My knees felt weak, but I took a deep breath and faced Karen. "You know," I started, my voice trembling slightly, "I used to think HOAs were about community, keeping our neighborhood safe, beautiful, fair. But you," I pointed at her, "you turned it into a weapon. You harassed me, fined me, and when you couldn't control me, you burned my home to the ground." Karen tilted her head slightly, like she was bored. "You could have killed me," I continued, my throat tightening. "You almost did." I woke up to my dog barking. If he hadn't, I wouldn't be standing here. I looked down for a moment, then back up at the judge. All I want now is peace. I just want to rebuild my life without having to look over my shoulder. The judge nodded, thanked me, and gestured for me to sit. That's when Karen finally spoke. "Your Honor," she said in that same patronizing tone she used when handing out HOA warnings, "this entire situation has been blown out of proportion." The courtroom murmured. Even her lawyer buried his face in his hands. Karen continued, "That man has been a constant problem in our community. He refused to follow rules, he disrespected me publicly, and he made me out to be some sort of monster online." The judge cut her off. "Ms. Daniels, you are not the victim here. You set fire to a man's home." But she didn't stop. Her voice grew louder, desperate, almost unhinged. "He provoked me. Everyone knows what kind of person he is. He made me look stupid. I was just trying to make things right for the neighborhood." Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, whispering frantically, but she yanked her arm away. "He deserved it," she shouted. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order." I just sat there, frozen. It was one thing to suspect she'd done it out of hatred, but hearing her say it out loud, with that twisted justification, hit differently. It wasn't guilt driving her, it was ego. When things finally settled, the judge took off his glasses and sighed deeply. "Ms. Daniels," he said, "in all my years, I have rarely seen someone so utterly incapable of remorse. You terrorized your neighbor, destroyed his property, and endangered his life, all because your pride was hurt." Karen just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, refusing to look at anyone. The judge continued, "You will serve 15 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10. You are also ordered to pay full restitution for the damages to Mr. Walker's property." Her face went pale. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked afraid. As the bailiff stepped forward to escort her out, Karen turned to me and hissed under her breath, "You think you've won? You'll never be free of me." I didn't respond. I just looked her in the eyes and said quietly, "You already lost everything trying to destroy me. I'm done letting you take more." She glared for one last second before being led away, the sound of her chains echoing down the hallway. When the doors closed, the judge looked at me and said softly, "Mr. Walker, I hope this brings you some peace." I nodded. But peace doesn't come easy after something like that. That night, I drove back to what used to be my home, or at least, the empty lot that replaced it. The ashes had long been cleared, but the smell of smoke still lingered faintly in the dirt, like a ghost refusing to leave. I parked, sat on the tailgate of my truck, and watched the sun dip behind the trees. My dog lay next to me, head resting on my lap. For months, that spot had been a reminder of everything I'd lost. But that night, it finally started to feel like something else, a place where I could start again. Insurance had finally come through, and construction crews were scheduled to break ground the following week. I decided to rebuild, not just the house, but everything Karen tried to take from me: peace, hope, home. As I sat there, my phone buzzed with a text from one of my old neighbors, Tom, one of the few who'd stood by me through it all. Saw the news. It's finally over, man. She's gone for good. I smiled faintly and texted back. Yeah. Time to move on. Then, right before I put my phone away, I noticed something strange: an email notification from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, HOA account records, for your eyes only. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were dozens of attachments, scanned documents, financial statements, meeting notes, all signed by Karen Daniels. But some of them showed massive fund mismanagement and unauthorized withdrawals from the HOA account. Even after being caught for arson, it looked like Karen had been hiding another secret all along. I forwarded everything to the police. Later, I learned she was facing additional charges for fraud and embezzlement while already behind bars. Apparently, she'd been skimming HOA funds for years, using them to pay her mortgage, buy community gifts, and fund her endless crusade of control. It turned out, burning my house wasn't just revenge, it was desperation. I'd embarrassed her in front of people who were already starting to question her authority. When her fake empire started to crumble, she lashed out in the worst way possible. That realization gave me the closure I didn't know I needed. Karen wasn't powerful anymore, she was just another broken person whose need for control destroyed her life. 6 months later, my new home was finished. No HOA. No rules. Just peace. I built the new deck first, wider, stronger, and overlooking the mountains. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was a message. To anyone who's ever been pushed around by people like her, remember, they only win if you let them. As I sat on that new deck one evening, with my dog at my side and the sunset painting the sky, I thought back to that day in court. Karen sitting there in chains, still pretending she had power. But she didn't. Because in the end, she was the one who burned everything she ever had, not me. And for the first time in years, I finally felt free.